They were just kids with glitter and big dreams. But no one expected this to happen. The stage lights were already glowing, even though the show had not started. Behind a long black curtain, 5 young girls stood in a small circle. Their outfits sparkled under the soft backstage lights. Bright pink, silver glitter. White boots. Their hair was tied neatly, shining with tiny clips that caught every bit of light. From far away, they looked confident. Up close, they were nervous. One of them kept rubbing her hands together. Another fixed her sleeve again and again. One stared at the floor as if the answers to her fear were hidden there. The sound of the crowd floated through the curtain. Loud voices. Laughter. Music playing in the background. Chairs moving. It sounded big. Too big. The stage manager walked past them and whispered, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Those words felt heavy. They had practiced for months. Every afternoon after school. Weekends without rest. They learned steps until their legs hurt. They sang the same lines so many times that they could hear them even in their sleep. But practice rooms are safe. This stage was not. On the other side of the curtain sat a large audience. Bright golden lights shined over rows of red seats. Parents held phones ready to record. Strangers waited with folded arms. High above, cameras hung like silent watchers. And at the front, behind a long glowing desk, sat the judges. Serious faces, calm eyes, waiting. One of the girls peeked through a small gap in the curtain. She saw the size of the room and quickly stepped back. "It's huge," she whispered. Another girl forced a small smile. "We knew it would be." Yes, they knew. But knowing and feeling are different things. A quiet voice inside each of them asked the same question. "Are we ready?" They joined hands. Their palms were warm, slightly shaky. One girl spoke softly. "No matter what happens, we stay together." The others nodded. Together. That word meant everything to them. They were not just a group. They were friends who had shared long car rides, quick snacks between rehearsals, and small jokes when practice felt too hard. They had cried when a move did not work. They had laughed when someone forgot the lyrics. They had grown stronger together. But tonight was different. Tonight was not about practice. It was about proof. The music outside faded. The host's voice echoed through the hall. The crowd clapped loudly. The sound rushed backstage like a wave. And now, the host announced, "Please welcome our next performers." The girls felt their hearts jump. Their group name was called. The curtain began to move. For one small second, everything went quiet inside their minds. No crowd. No lights. No judges. Just breath. Then they stepped forward. The stage felt larger than it looked on screen. The floor was smooth and bright, glowing under white and gold spotlights. The air felt cooler. The audience looked like a sea of faces. Some were smiling kindly. Some looked unsure. The judges watched carefully. One leaned back in their chair. Another held a pen above a notebook. A third crossed their arms. The girls walked to the center, mark taped on the stage floor. A small red X showed them where to stand. Cameras moved closer, their lenses shining taily net up. For a moment, no one spoke. The music cue was seconds away. One girl swallowed hard. Another whispered, "Smile." They all smiled. The first beat of the music filled the hall. It sounded louder than during practice. Stronger. The bass echoed in their chests. They started with a simple pose. Then the first line came. The voice that opened the song was soft. A little too soft. The girl felt it instantly. Her throat was dry. The sound did not come out as strong as she hoped. For half a second, fear rushed through her. Did everyone hear that? The audience stayed quiet. The judges did not react. The next line came quickly. Another member stepped in, her voice clearer, but her hands trembled slightly. They moved into the first choreographed step. A turn. A step forward. A synchronized clap. One foot almost slipped, but she caught herself. No one in the audience seemed to notice. Or maybe they did. It was hard to tell. The lights above them shifted colors, changing from white to soft pink. Shadows moved across the stage floor. The music grew stronger. They reached the first chorus. This was the part they practiced the most. Their harmonies were supposed to blend like one voice. The first note of the chorus rang out. For a tiny moment, their timing was not perfect. Just slightly off. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not panic, not fear, but a silent reminder. Together, they adjusted. Hust a breath, just a step closer to each other. And then their voices locked. The sound grew fuller, warmer, stronger. It was not perfect, but it was real. The audience began to lean forward. One judge lifted their head, another uncrossed their arms. The girls felt the shift. They felt it in the way the room grew still. They felt it in the way their nerves slowly turned into energy. Their movements became sharper, their smiles more natural, their steps lighter. They were no longer thinking about mistakes. They were thinking about the song, about why they loved singing in the first place, because when they sang together, something special happened. Their fears felt smaller. Their doubts felt quieter. The second verse began. This time, the voices were steady, the harmonies smoother. The girl who had started softly now sang with more strength. Her eyes shone under the spotlight. She was not hiding anymore. In the crowd, a few people started nodding to the rhythm. A small clap followed the beat. The girls felt it. Hope. But they were not at the hardest part yet. There was a high note near the end of part one of the song. A long, strong note that needed courage. They had talked about it for weeks. If we hit that note, one of them had said during practice, everything changes. Now that moment was coming closer. The music slowed slightly. The lights dimmed to a soft blue. The stage felt quieter, even though the audience was still there. One girl stepped forward for the build-up line. Her chest rose with a deep breath. Her heart beat so loud she thought the microphone might catch it. The other girls stood just behind her, forming a gentle line, their hands almost touching. The melody climbed higher, higher. The room held its breath. Even the judges seemed still, and just before the high note she closed her eyes. The story paused right there, in that single breath, because what happened next would decide everything. Her eyes stayed closed. The music grew softer, like the world was stepping back to give her space. The blue lights above turned pale white. A thin beam of light fell directly on her face. The rest of the stage faded into shadow. The audience became a blur. Her fingers curled slightly near her sides. She remembered the small practice room, the mirror on the wall, the speaker that sometimes stopped working, the days when the note cracked and she felt like giving up. She remembered the others standing beside her saying, "Try again." So she tried again. Now there was no mirror, no teacher, no second chance. Only this moment. She opened her mouth. The high note came out soft at first, thin, careful. For half a second, it felt like it might break. But she did not pull back. She pushed her breath forward, stronger, braver. The note rose higher, clearer. It filled the hall like light pouring through a window. The other girls stepped closer behind her, not touching, just near enough to remind her she was not alone. The note held. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The room stayed silent. No whispers, no movement. Even the judges seemed frozen. Then the note lifted 1 step higher. It rang out, strong and steady, like it had been waiting inside her all this time. When she finally released it, the sound faded slowly into the air. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy and endless. The girls looked at each other, Uzitano. Then someone in the crowd stood up. A clap echoed through the hall. Another clap joined. Then, more. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. The applause grew louder and louder. It filled every corner of the room. The girls' eyes widened. They had dreamed about this. But dreams never feel this real. The music kicked back in for the final chorus. This time, they did not sing with fear. They sang with joy. Their steps were sharp and full of life. Their hands moved freely. Their smiles were bright and honest. They were no longer trying to prove something. They were celebrating something. Their voices blended perfectly now, not because they were flawless, but because they trusted each other. The stage lights turned gold and pink again. Small sparkles reflected from their outfits, dancing across the floor. One judge began clapping along with the beat. Another nodded, with a wide smile. The third leaned forward, watching closely, eyes shining. The final move came. They stepped into a tight formation, shoulders almost touching. On the last beat, they struck their ending pose, heads lifted high, hands raised with confidence. The music stopped. This time, the silence lasted only a split second. The applause exploded again, louder than before. Cheering, whistles, people calling out words of praise. The girls stayed frozen in their pose for a moment longer, just to hold the feeling. Then they relaxed. One of them covered her mouth with her hand. Another blinked fast, trying not to cry. One simply stared at the crowd, as if afraid it might disappear. They walked toward the judges' table, still holding hands. The lights softened. The cameras moved closer. The giant screen behind them showed their smiling faces. One judge leaned toward the microphone. For a moment, the judge said gently, "I saw nerves." The girls looked down slightly, but then the judge continued, smiling. "I saw courage." The crowd cheered again. Another judge spoke. That high note, "You didn't just sing it, you believed in it." The girl who had sung it felt her cheeks grow warm. The third judge added, "You reminded everyone here that age does not measure heart." The girls squeezed each other's hands. They had heard many opinions before. Some kind, some not. Some people had said they were too young, too colorful, too loud, too hopeful. But standing there now, under the bright stage lights, none of those words mattered. What mattered was this. They had walked onto the stage afraid, and they had stayed. The host stepped forward with a bright smile. The golden lights shimmered above. The crowd slowly settled back into their seats, though their excitement still filled the air. "Before we decide anything," the host said softly, "how do you feel?" One girl spoke, her voice shaking but happy. "We feel proud." Another nodded. "We were scared." A third added quietly, "But we didn't want fear to win." The audience gave a soft, warm clap. The judges exchanged a look. A long pause followed. The camera zoomed in on the girls' faces. Hope mixed with worry, smiles that were trying to stay steady. The lights dimmed slightly around the edges of the stage, keeping focus on the center. The first judge reached for a button on the desk. The girls noticed. Their breath caught again. The crowd leaned forward. One small movement. One simple choice. That was all it would take to change the night completely. The judge's hand hovered above the button. The room felt tight. The girls stood close together, shoulders touching now. Not planned. Just natural, because no matter what happened next, they had already crossed a line inside themselves. They were no longer the same girls who had waited behind the curtain. They had found something stronger than fear. The judge looked up at them, smiled, and then the screen behind them flashed bright white. The sound that followed filled the room. But what it meant, and how it changed everything for them, is a moment that deserves to be felt fully, and that is where their journey truly began.